The morning it all fell apart started like every other Sunday in the Calloway house, with the smell of burnt coffee and the sound of her father's recliner groaning under his weight. Diane Calloway was 31 years old, standing at her childhood kitchen sink, washing a mug she didn't need to wash, just to have something to do with her hands. She had driven 4 hours to be here. 4 hours through rain and highway construction, and a playlist she'd listened to twice over, all because her mother had called and said, "Your father wants to talk." Those 5 words had lived rent-free in Diane's chest for the entire drive. She knew what the talk was about. She had known for 3 months, ever since she'd told them. Ever since the dinner that went so quiet she could hear the refrigerator hum from 2 rooms away. Ever since her father had looked at her across the pot roast and said, slowly, the way people speak when they're choosing to wound carefully, "I need time to process this, Diane." 3 months. He'd had his time. But when she turned around from the sink, her father, Robert Calloway, wasn't looking at her. He was looking at his phone. And the expression on his face was something she hadn't seen before. Not anger, not disappointment. Something more complicated than either. Something almost like concentration. She didn't ask what he was doing. She should have asked what he was doing. Her mother, Paula, came in from the back porch with garden dirt still on her knees and set a handful of zucchini on the counter. She looked between her husband and her daughter the way she always did, that exhausted referee look she'd been perfecting for 31 years, and said, "Breakfast in 20 minutes. Nobody answered her. Robert set his phone face down on the table. He cleared his throat. "Diane," he said. "Sit down." She sat. What followed was 40 minutes of conversation that she would later describe to her therapist as the most rehearsed thing I've ever watched a person do. Her father spoke in structured paragraphs. He referenced the Bible twice, family legacy once, and used the phrase "this lifestyle" for separate times. Her mother said almost nothing but kept touching the zucchini like they were prayer beads. When he was finished, Robert Calloway looked at his daughter and said, "We love you. But we cannot support this. And if you continue down this path, we won't be able to have you in our lives." Diane was quiet for a long time. Then she stood up, picked up her purse, and said, "Okay, Dad." 2 words. Flat as a highway. She hugged her mother, who was crying now, walked to the front door and left. She drove 40 minutes before she pulled over on the side of the road and just sat there, in the rain, engine running, hands on the wheel. She didn't cry. She just breathed. In and out. Like a person learning to do it for the first time. She never saw the post until her phone started ringing 4 days later. And by then it was already everywhere. The first call came from her cousin Britt, who led with, "Please tell me you've seen your dad's Facebook." The second call came from her Aunt Linda, who said nothing for 5 full seconds before asking, "Did you know he was going to do this?" The third call, the one that made Diane pull her laptop out and actually look, came from a number she didn't recognize. She found the post at 11:47 on a Wednesday night. Robert Calloway had a Facebook account he used primarily to share fishing photos and argue mildly about football. He had 214 friends, mostly church members, old co-workers, a handful of cousins. It was not a place where anything remarkable ever happened. Until 4 days ago when he posted this. "To all our family and friends. Paula and I have made a very difficult decision. Our daughter Diane has chosen a path that goes against everything we believe in and everything we raised her to be. We have prayed on this. We have spoken to our pastor. And we have decided that we can no longer in good conscience maintain a relationship with her until she chooses differently. We are, with great pain, disowning our daughter. We ask for your prayers and your understanding during this difficult time for our family." It had 47 comments. Diane read it 3 times. Then she closed the laptop and sat in the dark of her apartment for a very long time. She wasn't crying. She was doing something worse than crying. She was reading the comments in her head because she had read them, all 47, before she closed the laptop. And one of them, posted by her father's oldest brother, her Uncle Gerald, who she had always considered the most decent man in the family. One of his had stopped her cold. It said, "Robert, you did the right thing." What Diane didn't know, what nobody knew yet, was that Uncle Gerald was about to regret typing those 4 words more than anything he'd ever done in his life. By Thursday morning, the post had 112 comments. Diane knew this because Britt was texting her updates like a battlefield correspondent. Aunt Linda just commented, "Oh, this is getting bad." And because despite every instinct telling her not to look, Diane was looking. She was sitting at her desk at work, a spreadsheet open and completely ignored, refreshing her cousin's screenshot thread like it was oxygen. She wasn't the only one watching. That was the thing nobody had anticipated. Not Robert, not Paula, not Uncle Gerald with his 4 devastating words. The post was public. Robert Calloway, a 63-year-old man who once needed help attaching a photo to an email, had not thought to check his privacy settings before announcing to the internet that he was cutting off his daughter. And the internet, as the internet does, had found it. It started with a woman named Teresa Voss, a stranger completely unknown to anyone in the family, who had apparently seen the post shared by someone in a Facebook group for LGBTQ+ family support. Teresa's comment was long. It was measured. It referenced her own parents, her own coming out at 24, the 7 years she'd spent estranged before her mother called and asked to start over. It was not cruel. It was not attacking. It was simply a story, told plainly, placed like a stone in the middle of Robert Calloway's comment section. The family members who had left supportive replies did not respond to Teresa. But 47 strangers did. By noon, the post had become something else entirely. A live document, a public referendum, a place where Robert Calloway's decision was being examined by people who had never once heard of him or his daughter or the small Ohio town where they'd both grown up. Some were compassionate. Some were furious. Some were people who had been disowned themselves, leaving comments so raw and specific that Diane had to put her phone down and breathe through her nose. And then at 12:34 p.m. on Thursday, Diane's cousin Britt did something nobody asked her to do. She replied to the original post. Publicly. As a Calloway. For what it's worth, I'm Diane's cousin and I love her. What happened in this family is between all of us, but I want Diane to know publicly that she has people. Uncle Robert, I love you. But I don't agree with this. Not even a little. The family group chat, which had been eerily silent since the post went up, exploded. Diane's phone buzzed 16 times in 4 minutes. She watched the names roll in. Aunts, uncles, second cousins twice removed, people she hadn't spoken to in years. And she recognized immediately that she was watching her family fracture in real time, and there was absolutely nothing she could do to stop it. What she didn't see coming was her father's response. Robert didn't reply to Teresa Voss. He didn't reply to the strangers. He didn't reply to his niece Britt, even though her comment had 74 likes by 1 p.m. and was sitting right at the top of the thread. He replied to exactly one comment, posted by Uncle Gerald, the one that said, "You did the right thing." Robert's reply was 3 words, "Thank you, Gerald." And Gerald, who had been watching the comment section deteriorate with increasing discomfort. Gerald made a choice in that moment that would alter his standing in the family permanently. He deleted his original comment. At first, nobody noticed. Then Britt noticed. Then Britt screenshotted the deletion and posted it in the family group chat with a single question mark, and that question mark opened a door that nobody could close again. Because if Gerald was backing away, Gerald, who Robert had just publicly thanked, Gerald, who was supposed to be the anchor of the older generation's support, then what exactly was Robert standing on? Diane read the group chat from her car in the parking garage, where she'd gone because she needed to be somewhere that wasn't in front of her co-workers when whatever was about to happen happened. Her hands were shaking, but not the way they had during the conversation with her father on Sunday. This was different. This felt less like grief, and more like watching a will come loose from a car that was still moving. Her phone rang. Unknown number again. She answered it. The voice on the other end was older. Female. Slightly out of breath, like the person had been walking fast. It was her grandmother, Nana Ruth, 81 years old, Robert Calloway's own mother, who Diane had not spoken to in 6 weeks because Nana Ruth had a complicated relationship with telephones and an even more complicated relationship with conflict. Nana Ruth said, "Diane, honey, I just learned what your father did. I need you to listen to me very carefully." Diane pressed the phone against her ear. "I'm about to call your father," Nana Ruth said. "And when I'm done talking to him, things are going to look very different. I need you to be ready for that." She hung up before Diane could ask a single question. And for 3 hours, nothing happened. The comment section kept churning. The family chat kept exploding. Britt kept sending updates. And Diane sat in her apartment, watching the clock, waiting for whatever Nana Ruth had just set in motion to arrive. At 6:47 p.m., Robert Calloway deleted the post entirely. But it was already too late. The screenshots were everywhere. And somewhere in an Ohio suburb, in a house that smelled like mothballs and good coffee, Nana Ruth was still on the phone. And she was not finished. If you're still watching right now, you're exactly the kind of viewer I love. Subscribe so I can keep giving you stories that touch your heart. Hit that bell so you never miss what happens next. Here is what Diane knew about her grandmother. Nana Ruth Calloway had raised 5 children on a teacher's salary after her husband Earl passed in 1987. She had strong opinions about casseroles, weak opinions about politics, and absolute zero tolerance for what she called performative cruelty dressed up as conviction. She had also, Diane remembered now, never once raised her voice to do any of the most important things she'd ever done. Nana Ruth operated at a steady, patient frequency that somehow cut through everything. She was the kind of woman who could make a room go quiet by simply folding her hands. Diane learned what happened on that phone call in pieces, over the following 2 days, assembled from accounts given by Britt, by Aunt Linda, and eventually, reluctantly, in a voice that was smaller than Diane had ever heard from him, by her father himself. The call lasted 47 minutes. Robert picked up expecting sympathy. He had called his mother twice since Sunday, and both times she had listened without much comment, which he had interpreted as quiet agreement. He was wrong. Nana Ruth had been listening the way she always listened, gathering, not agreeing. She started by asking him to read the post out loud to her, because she said she didn't use Facebook and wanted to hear it in his own voice. He read it. She was quiet for a moment afterward. Then she said, "Robert Allen Calloway, when your father and I disowned you. Do you remember that? For 3 months when you were 22, because we didn't approve of the choices you were making." Robert said nothing. "You showed up at my back door," Nana Ruth continued. "December. Cold enough to hurt. And I let you in and I gave you soup and I told your father to sit down and be quiet, because whatever you'd done, you were ours. Do you remember what you said to me?" Still nothing from Robert. "You said, 'Mom, I just need to know someone still loves me unconditionally.' Do you remember that?" According to Britt, who got this from Aunt Linda, who got it from Paula, who was in the kitchen and could hear her husband's end of the conversation, Robert started crying somewhere around this point. Which was notable because Diane, in 31 years, had seen her father cry exactly twice. But Nana Ruth wasn't finished. Because the call wasn't just about Robert's past. It was about what Nana Ruth had decided to do about his present. She told him that she had spoken to 3 of his 4 siblings that afternoon. She told him that Linda was horrified. She told him that his brother Paul, who was the quiet one who never said anything about anything, had told Nana Ruth that he didn't want to be associated with this. She told him that Gerald had deleted his comment not because of public pressure, but because Gerald's own daughter, a woman named Rosie, 26 years old, who had not yet told her father everything about her life, had called Gerald weeping, and Gerald had understood, suddenly and completely, what he had endorsed. She told Robert that the family was not, as he had apparently imagined, standing behind him. And then she told him the part that nobody had told Diane yet. The part that Diane only learned when Britt finally broke and called her Friday morning with a voice that was half gossip, half genuine shock. Nana Ruth had told Robert that if he did not call Diane and apologize, she would be spending Christmas, and all future Christmases and Thanksgivings and Easters, at Diane's apartment. Alone. Without him. "You can choose your convictions, Robert," she had reportedly said. "But you will not make me choose between them and my granddaughter. Because I already know which one I choose." Robert deleted the post 40 minutes after hanging up. And then he sat in his house, and he didn't call anyone for 18 hours. Diane, meanwhile, was getting calls from everyone except the person she actually wanted to hear from. Britt called. Linda called. Even her cousin Patrick, who Diane had not spoken to since a dispute about a lawn mower at a family reunion in 2019, called to say he was sorry and that her father was wrong. A woman from her church back home sent a Facebook message. The pastor of her parents' church, not to Diane but apparently to Robert, reportedly reached out as well, though nobody could confirm what was actually said in that conversation. What everyone kept telling Diane in various ways was that the family was on her side. And Diane, sitting in her apartment surrounded by all this unexpected support, felt something she hadn't expected to feel. Not relief. Not vindication. Something almost like grief, because the family she had always assumed was a single unit, a solid thing with one opinion, was now revealed to be something much more complicated, and that revelation, even though it was in her favor, meant that everything she'd thought she knew about the last 31 years needed to be re-examined. Her father finally called on Friday at 4 p.m. She let it go to voicemail. She listened to the message 3 times before she decided what she was going to do next. And what she decided shocked even Britt, who thought she knew Diane better than anyone. The The voicemail was 2 minutes and 14 seconds long. Robert Calloway was not a man who left long voicemails. He was barely a man who left voicemails at all. The fact that this one existed, that he had stood somewhere in his house and spoken for 2 minutes and 14 seconds into a phone he didn't fully trust, told Diane something before she even pressed play. He didn't apologize in the way she had imagined apologies worked. There was no "I was wrong." There was no clean acknowledgement shaped like a door opening. What there was instead was something messier and, in some ways, more honest. A man stumbling through the distance between who he'd always been and who he was being asked to become, in real time, out loud, on a voicemail his daughter might never even listen to. He said he'd talked to his mother. He said he'd talked to his pastor. He said he hadn't slept in 2 days. He said that he had stood at the kitchen window that morning watching the yard he'd maintained for 27 years and tried to figure out what he actually believed. Not what he'd been told to believe, not what felt safe to say at church, but what he actually, down in the true core of him, believed about his daughter. He said he kept coming back to a memory. Diane at 7 years old, climbing the oak tree in the backyard against his instructions, falling and scraping her knee badly enough that she needed 4 stitches. And him carrying her to the car. Not angry, not lecturing, just carrying her, her face pressed against his shoulder, his hand on the back of her head. "I don't know when I forgot that that's all you ever were to me," he said on the voicemail. "Just mine. Just someone I carried." Then he said he was sorry. Not for the beliefs, he was honest about that. He said the beliefs were complicated and he needed more time with them. But for the post. For making it public. For the word disown, which he said he'd been awake at 3 a.m. regretting the specific weight of. He said he wasn't asking her to call back. He said he just needed her to know. Diane listened to it 3 times. Then she called Britt. "I'm going back," she said. Britt was quiet for a moment. "To your parents' house?" "Yeah." "When?" "Tomorrow morning." Another pause. "Diane, you don't have to do this. Everyone's on your side right now. You have all the leverage. You could let him sit with it longer." "I know," Diane said. "I'm not going for leverage." She drove the 4 hours on Saturday morning. Same highway. Same playlist, though she skipped some of the songs this time. It rained for the first 2 hours and cleared for the last 2. And by the time she pulled into her parents' subdivision, the sky was that particular pale blue that only happens after a long rain, everything washed and quiet. Her mother was on the front porch when she pulled up. Paula Calloway, 61 years old, still in her gardening jacket, holding a mug with both hands. She watched Diane get out of the car, and she didn't say anything. She just opened her arms. Diane stood in her mother's arms on the front porch for a long time. When she finally pulled back, she asked, "Where is he?" "Backyard," Paula said. "He's been out there since 7. Robert was standing at the oak tree. The one from the voicemail. He had his back to the house and his hands in his jacket pockets, and he was looking up into the branches the way people look at things they're trying to memorize. He heard her footsteps on the wet grass and turned around. He looked older than he had last Sunday. Not dramatically, not movie older, just the specific kind of older that happens when someone hasn't been sleeping and has been doing the hard internal work that aging people often don't do because it's so much easier not to." They stood about 10 feet apart. Diane spoke first. "I got your voicemail. I wasn't sure you would. I listened to it 3 times. He nodded slowly. Looked down at the grass. Back up at her. "I owe you more than a voicemail." "Yeah," she said. "You do. What happened next, in that backyard, under that oak tree, that part is Diane's. She has told pieces of it to Britt, to her therapist, to one friend from college who called to check on her. But the full version, the real version, the 2 of them standing in the wet grass with the pale blue sky overhead, that belongs to them. Some things that break have to be repaired in private, away from comment sections and group chats, and the particular cruelty of public opinion. What Diane will say to anyone who asks is this: it wasn't fixed. Not in a single conversation in a backyard. The conversation was real and it was hard, and her father cried for the second time she'd ever seen. And she cried too, and nobody said anything that magically solved the 31 years of assumption, and the 3 months of silence, and the 4 days of a Facebook post that turned her family into a comment thread. But something shifted. Something real. She stayed for dinner. Paula made roast chicken. They sat at the same table where, 1 week earlier, she had watched her father speak in rehearsed paragraphs about her lifestyle. They ate mostly in silence, but it was a different silence. Not the refrigerator humming silence of a week ago. This one had more give in it. After dinner, while her mother did dishes, Robert came and sat across from Diane at the kitchen table with 2 cups of coffee and said, "I want to understand. I'm not there yet. But I want to." She looked at him for a long time. "That's all I ever needed you to say," she said. She drove home that night. For hours, dark highway music low. She got back to her apartment at midnight, took off her shoes, sat down on the couch. Her phone had 47 notifications. The comment section drama had continued without her all day. New people, new opinions, family members posting and deleting and reposting, the whole ecosystem running on its own momentum now. Britt had sent 9 texts. Linda had left a voicemail. Someone had written a Reddit post about the whole situation that had 1,700 upvotes, and somehow her friend from college had found it and sent the link. Diane turned her phone face down on the coffee table. She looked at the ceiling for a while. Then she picked the phone back up, opened Facebook, an app she barely used, and navigated to her own profile. She hadn't posted anything publicly in over a year. Her profile photo was from 2022. She had 194 friends, most of whom she barely knew. She started typing. She typed for a long time, deleted some of it, typed again, read it back, changed one word, then another. Then she posted it. And within 4 hours, it had been shared over 3,000 times. This is what she wrote. "I've been watching strangers argue about my life for a week now. I've read comments from people who've been through versions of this themselves, and I want you to know, I read every single one of you. Thank you. I also read the ones from people who agreed with my father, and I want you to know, I read those too. Here's what I actually want to say. My dad posted something about me last week that hurt me in a way I'm still figuring out how to carry. Not because it was untrue, it was his honest feelings, as brutal as they were to read. What hurt was the public nature of it. The word disown. The way it made me feel erased, not just from his life, but from the version of myself I've been trying to build with some dignity. But I went back today. I sat in my parents' backyard with my father. We talked. We cried. Nothing is fixed. I want to be honest about that, because the internet loves a clean resolution, and this isn't one. My father is working through beliefs that are 30 years old. I am working through the specific kind of grief that comes from loving someone who doesn't yet fully know how to love you back in the way you need. That work takes time. What I want people to take from this is not, look how this family healed in a week. We didn't. What I want you to take is this. My grandmother called my father and told him the truth. My cousin stood up publicly for me when she didn't have to. My uncle deleted a comment because his own daughter called him crying, and he understood something he hadn't understood before. A stranger named Teresa Voss left a comment that I printed out and taped to my fridge. These things matter. Not because they fixed everything, but because they reminded me that the people who show up for you, even imperfectly, even late, even from a distance, they are the architecture of your actual life. I'm still gay. For anyone who needed that confirmed. I'm still me. I'm still my father's daughter, which is a complicated thing to be right now, and also the truest thing I know about myself. If you're going through something like this, if you're the person waiting for a parent to call, or the parent who knows they should, I hope this helps you understand that the call is worth making. Even if it's late, even if you don't have all the words yet, even if all you manage is 2 minutes and 14 seconds on a voicemail that someone listens to 3 times in an apartment in the dark. That's enough to start with. Diane. The post was shared 3,000 times in 4 hours. By Monday morning, it was over 11,000 shares. Teresa Voss, the stranger who had started it all with her measured comment, responded publicly. You printed it out. That reply alone got 400 likes. The family group chat, after days of noise, went quiet. Not the bad kind of quiet. The settling kind, like after a storm when everything is still and a little bit cleared. Britt sent a single text. You beautiful disaster. Nana Ruth, who did not use Facebook, was read the post over the phone by Aunt Linda. According to Linda, she listened to the whole thing without interruption. When it was done, she was quiet for a moment. Then she said, that girl. She got it from Earl. Robert Calloway did not comment on the post. He did not share it. But Paula, who checked his phone at midnight because she was worried about him, and she would tell you without apology that she has always checked his phone when she was worried about him. Paula saw that he had opened it. That the screen time on the link was 11 minutes. That he had read it, apparently more than once. He called Diane on Sunday morning, 1 week exactly after the conversation at the kitchen table. She answered this time. I read what you wrote, he said. I know, she said. A long pause. The kind that has weight in it, the kind that means something is being decided. "I'd like to try," he said. "If you'll let me. I'd like to try to understand." Outside Diane's apartment window, the city was doing what cities do on Sunday mornings, slow and unspectacular and moving at a pace that felt almost like peace. She sat on her couch with her feet tucked under her, phone pressed to her ear, listening to her father breathe. She thought about the oak tree. She thought about the voicemail. She thought about 7 years old and a scraped knee and a man carrying her to the car with his hand on the back of her head. Not angry, not lecturing, just carrying her like she was the only thing in the world that mattered. She thought about what it costs a person to change. What it actually costs in the marrow of who they are, to look at 30 years of certainty and admit that certainty might have a door in it. "Okay, Dad," she said. 2 words. Same as before, but completely different. Some families break loudly, in comment sections, in public posts, in the ugly grammar of old beliefs meeting new truths. Some families break and don't find their way back. This one is still finding it. That part of the story isn't finished. But the part that matters, the phone call, the backyard, the voicemail listened to 3 times in the dark, that part already happened. And it was enough.